The Israel-Palestine conflict is often shrouded in the misconception that it's an age-old feud driven by ancient religious animosities. In reality, while religion plays a role, the conflict primarily centers around two distinct groups of people vying for the same land. Its origin can be tracked back only about a century to the early 1900s. During centuries of Ottoman rule, the region we now call Israel-Palestine, situated along the eastern Mediterranean, was religiously diverse, comprising primarily of Muslims and Christians alongside a small Jewish minority. Despite their differences, these communities coexisted relatively peacefully. However, two significant shifts were underway. Firstly, an increasing number of people in the region began to identify not only as ethnic Arabs, but also as Palestinians, fostering a distinct national identity. Concurrently, in Europe, the Zionist movement gained momentum, asserting that Judaism was not just a religion, but also a nationality deserving of its own homeland. After enduring centuries of persecution, many Jews believed that a state in the Middle East was their best chance for safety, considering it their historic homeland. In the early 20th century, tens of thousands of European Jews migrated to the region. Following World War I, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, resulting in British control over the area, known as the British Mandate for Palestine. Initially, the British allowed Jewish immigration, but as tensions began escalating between Jewish immigration and local Arabs, violence erupted. By the 1930s, the British began limiting Jewish immigration, sparking the formation of Jewish militants to resist British rule and contend with local Arabs. The Holocaust further accelerated Jewish immigration to British Palestine and garnered global support for a Jewish state. In 1947, amid growing sectarian violence between Arab and Jews, the United Nations approved a plan to partition British Palestine into separate states, Israel for Jews and Palestine for Arabs, with Jerusalem designated as an international zone. The goal was to establish a Jewish state, secure Palestine independence, and end violence, while Jews accepted the plan and declared independence as Israel. Many Arabs saw it as European colonialism aimed at usurping their land. Consequently, Arab states declared war on Israel to establish a united Arab Palestine. Israel emerged victorious in the conflict, expanding beyond its designated borders and taking control of the western half of Jerusalem and significant portions of the independent Palestinian territory. Mass expulsions of Palestinians from their homes led to a massive refugee population, whose descendants number over 7 million today. Israel gained control over all territories except for Gaza under Egyptian rule, and the West Bank, named for its location west of the Jordan River, under Jordanian control. This marked the beginning of the long-lasting Arab-Israeli conflict. During this period, many Jews in the Arab-majority countries fled to Israel. In 1967, another war resulted in Israel seizing the Golan Heights, the West Bank, Gaza, and the Sinai Peninsula. Israel now occupied Palestinian territories, including all of Jerusalem. In 1978, Israel and Egypt signed the Camp David Accords, returning the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, but facing backlash in the Arab world. Over subsequent decades, other Arab states gradually made peace with Israel, despite the absence of formal treaties. However, Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and Gaza transformed the conflict into the Israeli-Palestinian struggle. Settlements established by Israelis in the West Bank and Gaza further complicated the situation. These settlements, often supported by the Israeli government, led to the displacement of Palestinians and hindered the prospect for an independent Palestinian state. By the 1980s, Palestinian frustration erupted into the first Intifada, characterized by protests and boycotts evolving into violence. Around the same time, Hamas emerged in Gaza as a violent extremist group dedicated to Israel's destruction, differing from the more secular PLO. In the early 1900s, leaders from both sides signed the Oslo Accords, establishing the Palestinian Authority to grant limited self-governance. However, hardlines on both sides opposed the accords, leading to violence and political unrest. Subsequent negotiations for peace dragged on for years. The Second Intifada, beginning in 2000, turned more violent. Israel's politics shifted right, leading to the construction of walls and checkpoints to control Palestinian movement. Palestinians felt increasingly hopeless, stuck under a growing occupation. In 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza, but internal strife divided the territory. Israel imposed a blockade on Gaza, exacerbating unemployment and suffering for its inhabitants. Today, the conflict remains volatile, with settlements encroaching on Palestinian territory, periodic wars in Gaza, and sporadic violence in Israel. There is little political will for peace, and the future remains uncertain, with the status quo considered untenable. The occupation by Israel persists, with both sides seeking resolution amid enduring challenges. So what is a peaceful solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict? While there is no one-size-fits-all answer, a lasting resolution typically involves a negotiation settlement that addresses the core concerns and grievances of both parties. Here are some key elements that could contribute to a peaceful solution. Number 1, two-state solution. One of the most widely discussed solutions is the establishment of two separate independent states, one for Israel and one for Palestine, living side by side in peace and security. This would involve clearly defined borders, with Israel existing within its pre-1967 borders, and the creation of a sovereign Palestine state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Number 2, Jerusalem. The status of Jerusalem is a highly sensitive and contentious issue. A peaceful solution would likely involve a shared international administered arrangement for the city, with both Israelis and Palestinians having access to their holy sites. Negotiations would need to determine the specifics of this arrangement. Number 3, borders. The borders between Israel and a future Palestinian state would need to be negotiated and agreed upon. This includes addressing the issues of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and their potential removal or incorporation into Israel. Number 4, security. Ensuring the security of both Israelis and Palestinians is paramount. Any peace agreement would likely include the provisions for demilitarization and international peacekeeping forces and mechanisms to prevent violence and terrorism. Number 5, refugees. The issue of Palestinian refugees and their right to return to their ancestral homes is a deeply emotional issue. A peaceful solution would involve addressing the refugee issue through compensation, resettlement, and acknowledgement of their historical suffering, with the aim of providing a just resolution for both sides. Number 6, recognition. Both Israel and a future Palestine state would need to recognize each other's right to exist in peace and security. This includes mutual recognition of sovereignty, diplomatic relations, and the normalization of relations between neighboring states. Number 7, water and resources. Equitable sharing of water resources, access to natural resources, and economic cooperation would be essential for the economic viability and sustainability of both states. Number 8, Gaza Strip. The situation in Gaza, which is currently under the control of Hamas, presents unique challenges. A peaceful solution would involve addressing governance, economic development, and security concerns in Gaza as part of a broader agreement. Number 9, international mediation. Given the complexity of the conflict, international mediation and support are crucial. The involvement of impartial third parties such as the United Nations, United States, the European Union, and the Arab states can facilitate negotiations and help build trust between the parties. Number 10, incremental steps. Achieving a comprehensive agreement may require a phased approach, where smaller, confidence-building measures lead to more significant agreements over time. These could include ceasefires, prisoner releases, and economic developments over time. Number 11, public opinion and education. Promoting peace and coexistence at the grassroots level is essential. Educational initiatives that foster mutual understanding and tolerance among Israelis and Palestinians can help build a foundation for lasting peace. So why did Hamas attack Israel? Hamas a Palestinian militant organization, has engaged in armed conflict with Israel for various reasons, shaped by historical, political, and ideological factors. Understanding why Hamas attacked Israel in the Israel-Palestine conflict requires examining these factors. Number one, nationalism and self-determination. Hamas, like many Palestinian factions, seek to establish an independent Palestinian state in the territories of Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, with Jerusalem as its capital. Their goal aligns with the broader Palestinian national aspirations for self-determination and sovereignty. Number two, historical context. Hamas emerged in the late 1980s during the First Intifada, a Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation. Its formation was partly a response to perceived shortcomings of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, the dominant Palestinian political entity at the time, in representing the interests of Palestinians. Number three, resistance against Israeli occupation. Hamas frames its attacks on Israel as acts of resistance against what it views as Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands. This perspective is rooted in the belief that Palestinians have the right to resist foreign occupation through various means, including armed struggle. Number four, religious and ideological motives. Hamas incorporates Islamist ideology into its political platform, asserting that Islam is an integral part of the Palestinian identity. While not all Palestinians share this perspective, for some, religious and ideological motives are central to their resistance against Israel. Number five, grievances and frustration. Ongoing issues such as the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, restrictions on the movement and access, the blockade of Gaza, and the lack of political resolution to the conflict have fueled Palestinian frustration and grievances, contributing to violence. Number six, opposition to peace process. At various points, Hamas has expressed opposition to the Oslo Accords and peace negotiations with Israel, viewing them as insufficient for achieving Palestinian rights and statehood. This sometimes translates into acts of violence as a means of challenging the peace process. Number seven, political power and control. Hamas gained political power in Gaza following the democratic elections in 2006 and subsequently clashed with Fatah, the dominant factions of the PLO. Its control over Gaza has given it a platform to assert its agenda, which includes resistance against Israel. Number eight, regional and international support. Hamas has received support from countries and groups that share its goals and ideological alignment. This support includes financial assistance, weapons, and political backing, which has enabled it to continue its resistance against Israel. It's essential to recognize that Hamas's actions have been met with significant international controversy. While some view Hamas as a legitimate resistance movement fighting against Israeli occupation, others label it as a terrorist organization responsible for violence against Israeli citizens. The Israel-Hamas conflict is characterized by cycles of violence and periodic military confrontations, with both sides attributing blame to the other. It's important to note that reaching a peaceful solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict is extremely challenging due to the deeply ingrained historical grievances, political obstacles, and shifts in leadership on both sides. Moreover, the views and preferences of Israelis and Palestinians vary widely, making consensus difficult to achieve. Ultimately, any successful resolution will require courageous leadership, international support, sustained negotiations, and commitment. It'll also necessitate addressing the legitimate rights, aspirations, and security concerns of both Israelis and Palestinians in a way that acknowledges the historical complexities of the conflict. Religion possesses the remarkable capacity to inspire profound acts of kindness, compassion, and unity among individuals and communities. It often provides solace, guidance, and a sense of purpose to countless lives. However, it is equally important to acknowledge that throughout history, religion has been at the center of conflicts, wars, and even violence, resulting in immense suffering and loss of life. When religious beliefs are distorted or misused to fuel hatred, discrimination, or conflict, the consequences can be devastating. It's a reminder that while religion can be a source of immense positivity, it must be handled with care and respect to ensure that it promotes peace, tolerance, and understanding rather than division and harm. In a world where religious diversity is celebrated and where individuals coexist harmoniously, faith can indeed be a powerful force for good, fostering a sense of unity and shared humanity. Peace is a cherished ideal that represents the collective hope of humanity for a future free from conflict and violence. It is a vision where nations and individuals coexist harmoniously, respecting each other's rights, differences, and aspirations. Central to the concept of peace is the belief that violence is never the answer. History has shown us the devastating consequences of conflict, the toll it takes on societies, and the profound suffering it inflicts on innocent lives. Instead of violence, peaceful means of dialogue, diplomacy, and cooperation should be pursued to resolve disputes and address grievances. This commitment to nonviolence not only preserves human dignity, but also paves the way for the sustainable development, prosperity, and well-being of all people, regardless of their background or beliefs. In a world where peace is the guiding principle, the pursuit of justice, equality, and understanding become the foundation upon which lasting harmony can be built. Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Hate begets hate. Violence begets violence. Toughness begets a greater toughness. We must meet the forces of hate with the power of love. Our aim must never be to defeat or humiliate our enemy, but to win his friendship and understanding. The ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Through violence, you may murder the liar, but you cannot murder the lie, nor establish the truth. Through violence, you may murder the hater, but you do not murder the hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.